Good morning and welcome back. This is World News coming to you live from Warsaw. I'm Salia Strzemska. And we begin with an update on Ukraine. The Russian army has launched a triple missile attack on Ukraine's Chernihiv. The regional military administration reported several severely damaged buildings and 5 injured in the attack. According to available information, the 5 people injured as a result of the missile strike are currently in the local hospital. Their condition is not life-threatening. It was also reported that 1 person was killed in the attacks and more than 10 private houses were damaged or destroyed. Ukrainian authorities were forced to temporarily suspend the supply of electricity and gas to affected areas to avoid accidents caused by gas leaks. There is no better time for Polish leadership in the European Union, given the challenging moment in history. That's according to the President of the European Council, Antonio Costa, and Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk. Both leaders spoke at the grand inauguration of the Polish presidency of the Council of the EU that took place in Warsaw last night.
Europe is lucky that it is Poland that is taking over the presidency at this challenging time in our history. Here in Poland, we are well aware that resilience, hope, self-confidence must be rediscovered. We must once again discover the meaning of freedom, Europe's true identity. The sources of Europe's greatness, freedom, independence, our culture, all of this is worth the effort. Some say it's worth the ultimate sacrifice. Let's do all that's in our power for Europe and Poland not to have to pay the highest price for freedom, strength, independence. Let's do all we can for Europe to be strong again.
There is no better time for Polish leadership in the European Union, because the vitality of Polish democracy and its sense of national identity make the European Union stronger, because Poland is a source of resilience at a time when authoritarianism and populism threaten our values.
Polish farmers gathered in Warsaw on Friday, protesting EU and domestic policies they argue are failing the agricultural sector. This comes despite farming being one of the greatest beneficiaries of Poland's EU accession.
A new year and a new farmers' protest in Poland. The date is no coincidence. The protests were planned on the day of the formal inauguration of Poland's presidency of the Council of the European Union, when a number of high-ranking EU officials will arrive in Warsaw.
For the farming sector, the situation is looking grim. The Green Deal, the Mercosur trade agreement, it doesn't benefit farming. We hope Mercosur won't be signed and implemented. It would significantly harm our farming sector, forcing us to slowly shut down agriculture and livestock farming.
With more than 20 various farmers' organizations joining the protests, they were united under a single slogan: 5 times stop. The farmers opposed the European Union's trade agreement with a group of South American countries known as Mercosur, the EU's Green Deal policies, the import of Ukrainian agricultural products into Poland, as well as the destruction of Polish forests and hunting, and the perceived shutting down of the Polish economy. The EU's deal with Mercosur, finalized after over 25 years of negotiations, requires approval from both the member states as well as the European Parliament. However, experts say the farmers' fears are exaggerated.
The things that are most impactful for the Polish agriculture sector, poultry and beef in this case. So this is something that could be competitive to our exports. They are far smaller than what Poland currently exports to the EU.
The Mercosur deal is the latest point of controversy voiced by the farmers, as previous protests focused primarily on the implementation of the EU's Green Deal regulations and the Ukrainian agricultural imports, threatening the Polish market with dumping prices.
What the current president of the Commission and the Parliament majority want is a destruction of farming in Europe, and that includes our Polish farming. In fact, it's the German policy which is being implemented, not the farmer's policy, especially not that of the Polish farmer.
Official data, however, does not indicate a serious threat to Polish farmers from EU initiatives. In fact, quite the opposite. More than 30% of the European funds Poland has received since its accession to the bloc have been geared towards agriculture, with 2/3 of that money going straight to farmers in the form of direct payments. At the same time, Poland has become an agricultural superpower, with Polish food exports reaching 52 billion euros, a tenfold rise since 2004.
Poland's Development Minister, Katarzyna Pełczyńska, has outlined priorities for EU funding for the country, emphasizing stronger local governance, alignment with European reforms, and a focus on national security. Here's more.
Cohesion funds have always been important to Poland, with Warsaw receiving the lion's share of the funds across the EU. The changing focus areas will mirror that of the rotating EU presidency, the ministers stressed at a press conference on Friday.
An important priority for the future architecture of the funds must be security, and there must be investments linked to the border with very difficult neighbors, of Poland and the EU as a whole. Our border is an EU border. Security and investments on this border are investments in the security of the EU.
With increasing threats leveled at the EU by Russia, eastern flank nations like Poland have beefed up their borders in recent months with major surveillance hardware and military equipment, notably Poland's Shield East, initiated by Prime Minister Tusk. Usually, EU cohesion policy is utilized to modernize energy and infrastructure projects in an EU member state, but geopolitical threats caused a push on realigning these funds so that the EU may be ready for any scenario.
One of them is larger, more ambitious investments in both dual-use infrastructure, that is infrastructure that can be used in the peace times, but if the need comes, can also be used for military needs, and this is especially important in regions bordering the eastern external border of the European Union.
Poland has been the biggest beneficiary of EU regional funds in the bloc, with over 76 billion euros allocated for the 2021 to 2027 period. Although no funds have been directly used for defense joint procurement or purchasing ammunition, Warsaw, at the helm of the EU rotating presidency, will do its utmost to change that.
We are also going to be looking into a discussion on how to perhaps loosen the very tight today rules on how to invest further into purely defensive capabilities of the European Union, perhaps supporting ammunitions, perhaps supporting defense structures and defense constructions in member states.
The European Union has long supported growth with its regional funds, helping raise prosperity across its new member states. Now, with an aggressive Russia on its doorstep, that support may now also be used to make the bloc stronger, and in line with the Polish presidency's motto, Security Europe. With the now pro-EU Poland and a new commission in Brussels, the question is, can Europe deliver?
A court in Finland has refused an application to release an oil tanker that's at the center of cable-cutting allegations in the Baltic Sea. The Eagle S was seized on suspicion that it had ruptured 4 telecoms cables and the East Link 2 Estonia to Finland power cable by dragging its anchor on Christmas Day. The vessel was carrying Russian oil at the time of the incident. Officials believe the Eagle S is part of Moscow's so-called shadow fleet of aging tankers that are used to evade sanctions on the sale of Russian oil. Baltic countries are on alert after a series of power cables, gas pipelines and data links were damaged following Russia's invasion of Ukraine nearly 3 years ago. Police are now questioning the crew of the Eagle S, which is being held near the Finland's port of Porvoo. In Austria, talks on forming a government have been thrown into disarray after negotiations broke down on Friday. Here is more.
Protests erupted after the far-right Freedom Party came first in September's parliamentary poll with 29% of the vote. Talks later began between 3 other parties aimed at forming a coalition to keep the Moscow-friendly Freedom Party out of power. Now these talks have broken down. Together, the three-party variant is history. Where are we now? What happens next? The task remains to form a government and agree on a programme. And in a liberal democracy, the whole thing requires a majority in Parliament to pass the necessary laws. Karl Nehammer and Andreas Babler told me in personal conversations today that they are continuing to work on a coalition. This must be done without delay. I want clarity, fast and comprehensive. The withdrawal of the Liberal Neos party raises doubts about the future of the coalition negotiations and boosts the Eurosceptic Freedom Party. Opinion polls show support for the Freedom Party has grown since it was sidelined in the coalition talks, increasing the pressure on the two remaining parties to find a solution.
The Prime Minister of Greenland says he will push for greater independence from its former colonial ruler, Denmark. The Prime Minister made the comments during an address on Friday. They come after US President-elect Donald Trump shared his renewed interest in the territory last month, which is part of Denmark. Trump has said Greenland is strategically important to the US. The territory was a Danish colony until 1953, but is now self-governing. Greenland's independence movement has gained traction over the past few years, in part due to revelations of misconduct by Danish authorities during the 20th century. The Prime Minister of Montenegro has announced measures to curb illegal weapons after a gunman's rampage killed 12 people this week. Milojko Spajic said searches will be carried out for illegal weapons, and people in possession will have a 2-month deadline to turn the weapons in before facing legal consequences.
Protesters in Montenegro hold a moment's silence for those slain in the New Year's Day massacre. They're angry about what they see as a lack of action by authorities to prevent Wednesday's mass shooting and the apparently bungled response. Now the Prime Minister has announced a crackdown. If, within the next 2 months, individuals in possession of illegal firearms do not surrender them, they will face severe penalties. For now, everyone can return illegal firearms without any legal consequences. And that's it. 2 months. We have concluded that a new law on firearms will be adopted, and upon its enactment, now I'm referring to legal firearms, individuals who currently hold permits will have to undergo new checks by January 1st, 2026. These checks will include security, psychological and other health evaluations. These evaluations will be much stricter than they have been so far. The 45-year-old gunman went on the rampage in the western town of Cetinje after drinking heavily and managed to evade police for many hours. He later turned his gun on himself. It was the second such incident in the town in the past 3 years. The police director has said the response to the shooting was delayed by misleading information, which sent the first patrol to a wrong location. Montenegrins will be praying the crackdown on weapons means an end to attacks like this.
US House Speaker Mike Johnson has been re-elected after an evening-long debate among the Republican Party members. After being handed back the gavel, Johnson remarked on American history and reminded Congress that freedom is never free.
This is a momentous time in the history of our nation. It really is. And as members of the 119th Congress, we are stewards of the great American Revolution that began almost exactly now 250 years ago, 1775 and 1776. It will fall at the time of this Congress, the great anniversary. And in these 2.5 centuries, we've been reminded repeatedly that freedom is never free. And we have stood tall as the greatest nation on the face of the earth. It is without debate. We are the freest, the most powerful, most benevolent nation that has ever been in the history of the world.
And that's it for World News, but please stay tuned for more.